You're listening to the Iterators of the Imperium.
Hi, I'm Miss, and I'm here with my lovely co-host Ryan, and you're listening to Season 4 of the Iterators of the Imperium podcast, the podcast in which Ryan is the expert on Warhammer 40K, and I am the noob trying to learn about the Warhammer universe. And coincidentally, this Ryan in Season 4 is episode number 50, which is kind of amazing if you ask me. That actually caught me off guard. We've been going for a while now. But yeah,
this is definitely the longest we've ever stuck with a project like this.
How long has it been, like, in terms of years? Like, second, third? I don't even know.
I think we're in our second at the moment.
Are you sure? I feel like it's been a bit longer.
I'm not sure. I think we might be approaching second anniversary.
Yeah, might be. It's fine. It's a good project at this moment, and yeah, it's fine. All right, let's get into it. So, Ryan. Yeah, what are we doing today for Season 4? As to begin with, it's a big moment. It's a big moment.
You don't even know. You got no idea.
We've been on, at least I've been on like a holiday vacation away. I've been on like in Greece, in Rhodos, just chilling by the pool. So I'm not gonna lie, I haven't been thought about Warhammer, but I'm ready to become back and, learn again, right? Because I am still the noob. I'm still the noob trying to learn about the Warhammer universe, so,
You just like saying that now.
I do. I really do.
All right. So as you'll remember, Season 1 was like a vague timeline, right? We covered major events along the way to get you from where we are now to kind of modern day of 40K, right?
Yeah.
Season 2 was going over all the factions in like vague detail.
Mm-hmm.
Season 3 was Primarchs.
Yes.
And Season 4 is going to be Legions.
Ooh, Legionnaires. All right.
Yeah. But it's not just going to be the Space Marine Legions. We're not just talking about the Legiones Astartes, right?
Okay.
Because there is more that is referred to as a Legion in 40k than just them.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Dum dum dum.
So we will have the 18 Space Marine Legions. Mm-hmm. We are also going to have the Legio Custodes, so Emperor's Honor Guard. There are the many, many legions that make up the Collegia Titanicus, which are going to be great. Do you know what that is?
I'm not going to lie, I'm rusty, but go on. For everything, by the way. I'm rusty for everything. I'm sorry I have to interrupt here. Just so people know, I'm still the noob and I'm rusty in my knowledge right now. I haven't been thinking about it. I've just been on vacation mode, so my brain is still, idle. But go on, Ryan. Sorry.
Yeah. So the Collegia Titanicus is the Titans, the war machines, the giant robots that the Imperium uses. Yeah, it's the groups that make up them. So the overarching structure is called the Collegia Titanica, and then all the groups are titled as legions, like Legio Sirius or stuff like that. So we're going to be talking about them at some point. We're going to talk about the Legio Cybernetica, which are the automatons that the Mechanicum use for combat, and many, many other things, because, well, what else would you use them for? I'm thinking possibly even an entire episode devoted to the Legion of the Damned, which is the Space Marine chapter, which basically just appear as ethereal ghosts out of the warp and save the day. When the Imperium needs them most, the whole squad of Space Marines just appear out of the warp and save the day.
And his name is John Cena.
Yeah, basically like that, yeah. And lastly, I think that there's one I really want to cover, but it's not technically a legion in name. It is, though, in number, because they outnumber every other force in the galaxy about 10 times over, and that's the Guardsmen. But I was thinking, since we covered Guardsmen in Season 2, we would look at some of the specialised divisions. So, like, looking at the Cadian Shock Troopers properly, or the Armageddon Steel Legion, or the Armageddon Orc Hunters, which are fun. The Palatine Sentinels, Lucifer Blacks, and I was thinking maybe even have a quick look at the Tanith First and Only, or as they're better known, Gaunt's Ghosts.
Ooh.
Yes, there's a novel series called Gaunt's Ghosts, just about this one regiment of guardsmen, and it is apparently one of the best series. Like, as far as I can see, it's one of the series that most 40k fans agree is a great series. There's always an argument about most series. Like, there's a Mechanicum series that I really enjoyed, and it seems like it's widely hated in the community. This trilogy.
That's just the thing about Warhammer. It's so huge, right?
Yeah, a lot of it is very divisive because of that, because of the scale.
I don't think you can help that, but it's...
No, you can't. It's very difficult for any community to get that large and not eventually turn in on itself. So,
yeah,
it's one of those things. But as far as I can see, Gaunt's Ghost seems to be kind of above that, if you know what I mean. So,
yeah,
it would be fun for us to get a proper look at them.
Yeah.
Now, before we get into today's episode and what we're going to be talking about, you know how we always have a gimmick for the season? So, like, we did quotes for a bit, we did telling the story as if it was,
Me.
that were the character. So, for this season, I've got a gimmick that I want to try, right? And it was my girlfriend's idea to do this. So, you can blame her. Basically, I am going to give you a term, right, from 40k. Right? It could be a term, it could be a word. In this case, it's a term, right? And what I want you to do is tell me what it is. Explain it to me, right? But you don't need to be right, and you don't need to know, like, what I'm talking about. If you know the answer, obviously, tell us the answer by all means.
Okay.
But feel free to absolutely just bullshit it as best you possibly can for entertainment purposes.
Right? All right, I
you
like
with me?
that.
Yeah,
because I'm good at bullshitting, so it's fine.
Exactly, right?
Oh, well, thanks.
So, yeah, it should be fun.
Yeah, I'm down.
Yeah. So, are you prepared for this?
Oh, that's a separate question, but I think so. I hope so. At least I hope so.
Don't we all? This should be worth a laugh.
Lay it on me, Ryan.
Your term that I want you to explain today is throne mechanicum. As in, like, a throne in relation to the mechanicum. What does the term throne mechanicum refer to? Take your time.
Throne mechanicum. Because I thought it was, at the beginning it's like, you throw something. But it's
throwing
a throne.
something. No, throne like a big fancy seat.
Oh, now my Warhammer knowledge is rusty at best at this point anyways, but the mechanicum, like... I don't know why I'm just having this Game of Thrones vibe going on in my head with like a mechanic chair, like just rusty bits, and they all hail the king. I don't, that kind of thing. It's a term used by what they would called. What are they called, Ryan?
Tech priests?
Yes. Those Mad Max ones, right?
Oh, the techno barbarians.
Yeah, the techno barbarians, the Mad Max styles, right?
Yeah.
It's used to hail the almighty Mechanicum king. I don't know.
Okay.
The almighty techno barbarian.
Hail the king techno barbarian on his throne mechanicum.
Yes.
I love it.
Made obviously in like a Mad Max style throne of like
naturally car parts and stuff.
And leather seats, right? with freaking an engine underneath it that, when you turn it up, it shakes, so it's like also a vibrating chair, because it like...
It's just really bad for your spine.
It's fine, though. You sit comfortable, but you don't have a long, good life. But it's fine. You're the king.
Kings were meant to die young on Mars.
Yeah. Oh, you also have like a stool to lay your feet upon.
Naturally, the stool mechanicum.
Almighty stool mechanicum. I like it. But I'm so far away from what it is. I
absolutely.
But this is my speciality. Like, I can take something and I can bullshit my way out of it. So that's what I've been doing. Like, fake it till you make it, essentially.
All right. So do you want to get on to today's episode?
Yes, sir. I think we should.
Yeah. So they say start as you mean to go on, and in the spirit of that, we are going to go big or go home. So today we are starting by talking about the Titans. These big bad boys here. So we've mentioned the Titans a lot, but this is going to be the first time properly looking at them. Those big bad boys. What are your initial thoughts on these guys?
They're huge.
Yes, they are.
Oh god, that's big. I mean, obviously in the name is Titans. They look lethal.
Yeah, they absolutely are.
But then again, it's Warhammer. Everything is either huge or lethal, or huge and lethal. Like it's it's Warhammer.
Yeah, there aren't a lot of options. It's kind of a one, the other, or both, and nothing else.
Yeah, nothing in between. The thing is in between die.
Yes. So these are what we're going to talk about today.
Yes.
So the Titan Legions actually have a surprisingly humble beginning. Because they never started out like this. This was never what they were intended to be when they were first built. Yeah. So back, like, before the Age of Strife, right? When humanity was first kind of venturing out and starting colonies on other worlds, right? We obviously didn't have the warp yet. So we didn't have a way to travel particularly fast through space. So what we did was we built these big colony ships. So they were just massive spaceships that you could fill with everything humanity would need when they got to this new planet, like generations later, to build a functional colony. So you would have thousands upon thousands of people in there. You would have whatever you need for making food, cleaning water, whatever else, right? You would have everything you would ever need on this ship. And they were sometimes referred to as generation ships because the people that were on it were never going to see where they were going to, like, where the ship was going to land, right? Like, me and you get on it with our partners as part of the colony crew. We're never going to see this planet we're going to land on. We can be heading to Caliban, right? Homeworld of the Dark Angels. We can be heading there, right? It will take probably a couple 100 years to get there. Right? So it's going to be like our grandkids are the ones that build this colony. So our only job is to procreate and stay alive for as long as possible.
I can do that.
Yeah. We have the easy part. We're not even building it. We just stay in a ship. We're cool.
Yeah. And I'm good at procreating.
Yeah. Well, is this where I find out you've secretly got a bunch of kids?
No.
14 and counting. Take that, Elon Musk.
Wait, what?
Oh, isn't that a thing? Kids. Yeah, it has tons of kids, doesn't it?
Also, Boris Johnson, fun fact, has a lot of kids.
Did not know that.
Yeah, that's fun fact
that's
of the day.
Surprising, being that I've seen Boris Johnson. Fair enough. Yeah, have you not?
No, I live in Denmark. But I actually, in terms of the kids, like, that I'm going to go on the whole thing, I think it's very easy to have kids when you're super rich.
Fair.
I don't know why.
Fair. You might be onto something.
It's just so freaking easy to have kids because, you know, you can have people raise them, do everything essentially. You can pay, like, for.
Yeah, you can just pay someone to raise your kid for you. Fair enough, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a solid point.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's almost like everything's easier when you're ungodly rich.
One day, right?
Back to these guys.
Yes, sir. Titans.
Yeah. So, part of these colony ships was that obviously they would need to literally build a society when they got to these new worlds, right? And we're gonna use the Dark Angels' homeworld, Caliban, as an example, because that obviously was a colony world. Otherwise, there wouldn't have been a human society there for Lionel Johnson to end up part of, right?
Yeah.
So one of these ships goes all the way to Caliban, finally lands with however many generations later, and the world is basically just forest, top to bottom, right?
Yeah.
Like, right, well, we need a way to, you know, cut down all these trees so we can clear land to build in, but also we need to get the lumber to be able to build stuff with. That's what the Titans were originally designed for. So a lot of early Titans had like a drill for an arm or like a big chainsaw for an arm. And it was because they were designed for like, you know, like material gathering and like tree felling and like mining and stuff like that. They were designed for functional like utility purposes, right?
So not war, more utility, like the ultimate lumberjack, for example.
Exactly, right? They could fell an entire like mile of forest in about 10 minutes, kind of hang, was the idea, right?
Yeah.
So it would make it a lot easier to build a functional society right at the start. So as soon as the ship lands, someone rocks out in a, like a 50-foot tall Titan with a chainsaw arm and just starts decimating trees, and all the people just get to work turning them into buildings. Right?
Yeah.
Nay bother.
Yeah.
So, absolutely excellent. To be fair, at the time, they weren't Titans like that, because these are like Reavers and Warlords, which are much larger and only built for military purposes. The early ones were like the Knights, which are only like 25, 40 feet tall kind of area. So they were literally sized and designed for, like utility purposes, construction and stuff like that. So it's not quite like this, but you get the idea. Now, what's the second problem you face on a planet like Caliban? The giant monsters. Now, there were no Space Marines at this point, because humanity didn't have any reason for it. Like, we were nowhere near that stage yet. So we had guns, but they don't do much to giant monsters. You'd be losing people a lot faster than you'd be killing monsters. And then some guy nearby who's cutting down some trees goes, "This chainsaw will be handy." And suddenly they're being used for defensive purposes as well. Because it turns out a giant chainsaw or a giant drill are quite effective weapons.
Yes, against giant monsters.
Yes.
It adds up. It adds up,
The math is clear.
Yeah, the math is clear. It makes sense.
Well, you can see how they got there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, why fighting a giant fighting monster with gun? Good. Fighting giant monster with normal gun? Not good. Fighting giant monster with giant gun? Yes. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
I believe, I don't know for a fact, I'm led to believe that some of the early ones also had stuff like rivet guns, which were, again, for building purposes, right? Because you could just bolt together an iron structure in about 10 seconds with this thing, and it'd be like an entire building, because it's that height. Or like a welder. So some of them would have like a welding torch or like a plasma cutter or something like that on its arm, which also would make an incredibly effective weapon.
It would.
Yeah.
It would. Also very good to rob a bank, but that's a separate thing.
You've been playing Payday 3, have you?
No.
No.
That
game is just wall-to-wall plasma cutters, I swear.
Oh, I need to try it. But yeah.
You do, it's free.
Is it? I didn't even know.
If you have Game Pass. Anyway. So, obviously, there is a big jump from, like, lumberjack robot to giant war machine, right?
Yeah.
There's a bit in the middle there that we've missed out. Now, it comes from, like, the Age of Strife that these things start to develop, right? So in the Age of Strife, obviously, Mars went from being, like, a lush world that had been terraformed back into a desert hellscape with all the techno-barbarians, like we were talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And part of what came out of this, after the cult Mechanicus started to form properly and they had built some forges and stuff, they hadn't fully eradicated the techno-barbarians. Mm-hmm. And there was a group that were mech rights. They built giant machines to attack the Mechanicus. And in response, to take care of this, I believe they were like the Psycanivores or something like that they were called. Anyway, they were mech rights. Psycarnivora. That's what it was, yeah. They were mech rights. So they built these giant robots. To fight them, the Mechanicus went, well, they've got giant robots. We've got these plans for old giant robots. Let's strap some guns onto them and just, giant robot against giant robot. Let's do this. Ours will be better. And that's what they did. So they built the first knights and stuff, knights and titans, for military purposes by repurposing old designs and using them to fight this foe, because that's what that foe was using, just terrible versions of it built with scrap. The Mechanicum just did it properly. So naturally, they wiped the place clear of those techno-barbarians. And then those Titans that now existed for military purposes ended up as like a standing defense for all of the forges on Mars. So anything that came to attack them, you had a Titan to deal with now. Because we built it, we're going to use it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then gradually it became a pretty standard thing. So modern day, every forge world that Mars has set up produces a Titan Legion as their standing defense force. So every forge world in Mars has an entire legion of Titans just protecting that planet. So if you want to take on one of Mars's home worlds, you do have to be prepared to take on an army of these guys too. Which is a fair threat, and you can see why people don't really fuck with the Mechanicum very much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Understandable.
Yeah. Where am I? So we only really see like a proper military advancement and like widespread use of these once the Mechanicum and the Imperium join forces after the Treaty of Olympus, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the point where the Mechanicum agrees to help the Emperor and like, you know, build his fleet for him so he can get all the ships to start the Great Crusade. Yeah. But part of that meant that the Imperium had at its side all of the forces that Mars had, and that included Titans. So all of the Great Crusade had Titans being enlisted into combat. So it was really common for a bunch of Space Marine drop pods to hit an alien planet, and then shortly after, a bunch of these dudes to drop pod down as well.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, the Titan storyline follows the same kind of path as the Space Marine one, which is when the War Master turned evil, half the Space Marines turned evil, and half of the Titans turned evil as well. So there was traitor Titans in the field as well, unfortunately. I think the most notable would be Legio Sirius, which were...
Serious?
Oh yeah, I'm serious.
No, you can't about that? I'm sorry.
So, I don't know if all of them turned traitor, but at least a huge amount of them turned traitor. But this particular legion was like the largest Titan legion ever. There was like 200 Warlord Titans in its ranks. It was an absurd number of war machines. But, you know, like the Drop Site Massacre. No, not the Drop Site Massacre. The purging of the legions at Estevan 3 after the Drop Site Massacre. Yeah. No, prior to the Drop Site Massacre, sorry.
The timeline, Ryan, is...
I know, it's all over the place. Even during that, the purging of the Legion, Legio Sirius had warlords in the field. I think there's a particular one that some of the first couple of books follows called the Deus Irae, and there's a point where like it's the crew of this Titan. Only some of them turn traitor and some of them don't. So there's a point where you're seeing it from a loyalist point of view, and all of a sudden they just stop dead, and then like all of the hatches that lead outside just seal up, and they're like, what the hell is going on? And then obviously the planet gets virus bombed to wipe out all the loyalists. And then you have this point inside the Titan where the loyalist crew members are like, what the fuck did we just do? And then you have like a shootout in the crew compartments of the Titan between the loyalists and the traitors. It's really fun.
Fun.
Yeah, but these guys, like, even the traitors and the loyalist Titans were fighting all the way till the siege. Like,
yeah,
I believe other traitor Titans from the Legio Sirius were actually there on this, like, on Terra during the siege and broke part of the walls and stuff to let the traitors in. So the Titans were a big part of it. They were right there alongside the Space Marines the whole way through. Yeah, so that's fun.
Yeah.
Obviously, when you get to the kind of more modern day part of it, it's still the same deal. There's still loyalist and traitor Titans. We've not gotten rid of them. The problem is now half the traitor Titans are all chaosy. Like, you've even got Plague Lord Titans now that are all nurgled up. Yeah, they're pretty minging.
Yeah, I could imagine.
Yeah, they're more like living disease than they are machine at this point.
They stink, quite literally.
Yeah. So, obviously, in the modern day, loyalist-wise, because we're talking more loyalist-wise here, we're not really bothered about the evil Titans. Fuck those guys. We'll get to them later. As I said, every Forge world has an entire legion of these guys as a standing defense. But that's not the only way that Titans exist. They do exist outside of that. So, for example, there's an area of the galaxy called the Iron Veil, right? And in it, there is the main planet of the Iron Veil is a planet called Camador, which has like a royal family that have been in control for, well, God knows how long, really, right?
Yeah.
Emperor only knows how long these people have been in charge. But this is a night world. So it's probably the case that they were a generation ship that had a bunch of knights on the ship to help them colonize when they landed. And since that time, it's the royal family and like high-ranking knights and military men basically have became the pilots of these knights, like they're walkers, robots, and they use them to defend their own planet. So the Iron Veil is on the bad side of the galaxy now, the side without the light of Terra. But they've basically been untouched by chaos because anything that's tried to attack them, on one side of them, there's an entire like asteroid field of like ship wreckage that anything would have to get through, full of mines and stuff like that they've set up as a kill zone basically, so nothing can attack them. They've got massive orbital defenses because they've been around that long. And if anything does make it to ground, they've got their own entire army of these knights. They might only be like 40 feet tall, but they'll still fuck up most things, you know? So short of a Chaos Titan landing on their planet, they probably don't have much to worry about. So there are Titans outside of just Mars and the traitors that exist. They're just... They just have their own job to do sometimes. Totally unaffiliated with Mars and things like that. Which is quite cool.
Yeah.
So you never really know where you're going to find one.
It's a surprise.
I'm waiting for like a book about like a random guardsman who gets like abandoned on a random world. Like maybe his whole platoon dies, he's the last one alive or something, and just finds a Titan in a swamp somewhere. It just sounds like something that'll happen, you know?
It really does, actually.
It'd be cool too.
Yeah.
So... Right, there's some organization to how Titan legions actually work, right? So you can make them up in any different way. There is quite a common place for there just to be a ton of warlord Titans, which are like the big boys, right? These kind of guys, the big tanky bastards, right? There is... Well, actually, I think these are Reavers, to be fair. Anyway. There is something to be said for the fact that you can get like a variety of different sizes of Titan to make up a legion of Titans, right? They'll be like one pack, if you get what I mean.
Yeah.
Or you can have just a bunch of the smaller ones, things like that, right? A lot of the time, it's typically a mix of them, of different sizes, because they're designed for different purposes, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, if you just had, say, like 3 of the giant warlord Titans in the battlefield, you run the risk of them being destroyed by infantrymen with heavy weapons, right? It would take a lot of it to damage them, but if, say, the shields get damaged by, like, you know, actual, like, building-mounted artillery, all it takes is one guy with a well-placed rocket launcher standing at the thing's foot to take out a leg joint, and then the thing's scrapped, you know?
Yeah.
Right? So typically you would have a mixture of Titans, although the Titans will always be followed by like Mechanicum troops or infantrymen of their own or something like that, right? They'll always have backup. But it's quite typical to have a mixture of sizes of Titans fighting alongside each other for different purposes. So the smaller ones can be doing crowd control and taking out guys close by. The bigger ones can be taking down like fortifications miles away. That kind of thing. So, as a good example, actually, the Mechanicus series I was talking about earlier, the trilogy that most people seem to hate, in that, it's about a Mechanicum expedition, right? So they take tons of forces with them of all different groups. There's Cadian soldiers, there's all the Mechanicum troops, there's a Titan Legion, there's Black Templars for some reason. And the Titan Legion in that is made up of 4 Titans. So they have a leader that is a Warlord Titan, the largest of them, called Lupa Capitolina. Then you've got a Reaver Titan, which is the middle size, named Canis Ulfrica. And then you've got 2 Warhounds, which are the small Titans, right?
Yeah.
Amarok and Vilka. And that is a pack of Titans. That's a full legion as far as they're concerned. But they cover basically any eventuality. Between the set of them, they're prepared for basically anything that the enemy can throw at them.
Yeah.
So that's a good example of the way these things are typically set up. Obviously, if you have like an entire army of Space Marines, just send in the big guys. Nothing small's getting near the Titans. But if you're running like as a strictly Titan Legion, you'd want the versatility of the different sizes, because otherwise you run the risk of losing the big guys to something stupid.
Exactly.
Yeah. The problem with being that big is you're also a very big target.
The bigger they are, the easier they are to hit. Essentially.
Well, that's it. Yeah, it's really hard to mess with a rocket launcher when the thing you're shooting is that big.
Yeah, and you don't want it to be a situation like you said, like Achilles' heels, Like
actually,
strong, but that little weak point. And
yeah. So actually, I'll show you here. This is a show of the different sizes, right? So the bottom ones there are knights. These are the ones that were on that the Iron Veil has as a Night World. This is what they have. That's probably about the size that the ones for like cutting down trees and stuff originally were. They were probably about that scale. Although knights are adapted for combat specifically. Then the Warhounds are the small ones, right? So that's that's not Canis Ulfrica. That's Amarok and Vilka in this set that I was just giving you an example from. Yeah. And the Reaver's your middle ground, and the Warlord's the big boy. But you also have the Warbringer in the middle there as another one. And right at the top end, we've got the War Master Titan, which is an absolute beast.
Yeah.
But this gives you an idea of the scale compared to each other. So there is like a fair jump between Warhounds, Reavers, and Warlords.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want one, Ryan.
Me too.
Imagine going to work in that. I am the boss now. I'm the CEO.
I am the captain now.
Look at me. I am the captain.
So we're gonna... Actually, I'll show you one more picture of these Titans, just because they're cool as hell.
Yeah, and we can use our screen a little bit more now that it's bigger.
I have more going forward. But I just want to show you this one more as just like a nice little battle zone.
I like it.
Yeah. So
also, we gotta credit the artists if we can in any way, shape, or form.
These are official Warhammer community pieces.
Oh.
So these are actually published by Games Workshop.
Well, that's the most credit you can get, essentially. That's
the
highest honor.
You can see the Warhammer community tag in the top corner of this one.
Ah.
Yeah.
I see. I didn't notice that. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I'm just telling you.
I'm just dumb.
So the next thing I want to do is I want to mention the main staffing of Titan, right? Because it's important and it's quite interesting. Also, I'll give you a quick rundown of like the typical parts that are important to know about in a Titan. So obviously, giant war robot, it needs a crew, right? This thing doesn't run itself, right? Oh. So you'll obviously have tons of typical engineers and servitors just doing day-to-day maintenance-y stuff, keeping things from blowing up and things like that, right?
Yeah.
And there is a different amount of them based on the size of the Titan you're dealing with, right? So when you get up to like a Warlord, you've got like an army of people keeping this thing running, right? But when you're down at like a Warhound, you might only have like 10, 15 of a crew. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Plus a ton of servitors, but who cares? They don't count. So that's typically the standing crews. You'll have tons of engineers, tons of servitors doing day-to-day stuff. You'll also have like chief engineers somewhere, but no one cares about them. The important crew are the Princeps and the Moderati, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So we're going to start with the Princeps, right? Because they're like the pilot. They are the one controlling this whole thing. One guy runs the whole machine, right? So
pretty important.
Yeah. He controls it with his mind.
Okay.
He basically, once you become a Princeps, they install like interface ports directly into your brain, so you can be wired, like hardwired into one of these machines. And that then kind of thing, once you're connected in, say you go to move your leg won't move. The Titans will. So you essentially become the Titan at that point, right?
Yep.
That's the idea. This is done through a piece of equipment called the Throne Mechanicus.
Okay, so I was far off.
A little bit, yeah. It is a chair, sometimes.
Yeah, but it's like RoboCop, essentially, right?
Kinda, yeah. So the idea is you'll get this Princeps, strap him into the chair, connect into his brain, and he's good to go, ready to rock and roll, running a Titan, right? Mm-hmm. In this position, he is able to independently control every system of the Titan, be it like shields, weapon, or, well, targeting, firing, movement, whatever, right? Power distribution, any. He can control all of it. Yeah. Typically, they only really pay attention to targeting, firing, and moving, and they leave the rest of it to the crew, right?
Yeah.
But there is like an inbuilt system. You know how the Mechanicus believe that all machines have a machine spirit?
Yeah.
Yeah, in this case, it's kind of true, right? Like, it could be nonsense in a lot of other states. With Titans, because of how complicated they are, and the fact that they have to have this, like, interface built in for humans to connect into them, they kind of have a mind that they gradually build of their own. So when you connect into it, it can end up being quite difficult to separate from it after a while. And a lot of Princeps end up being so heavily bonded into the mind of their Titan that if they were to leave it, they would die. So they end up not being able to leave after a while, like after doing it for long enough.
Yeah.
But it's quite an intoxicating feeling being in control of a Titan because it's so powerful.
Yeah, I could imagine, like, if you're a scrawny little dude, right, and you just,
which they usually are.
God, I could imagine, but you have the opportunity to become like a giant as well,
a god, for lack of a better term.
Essentially, like the power you will feel. Honestly,
yeah,
it's like Avatar.
Yes, right. Exactly like that.
You have the guy who can't even move his legs, and he's scrawny because of that. He's lost all his strength, and then you come into like an artificial body, whatever it is, right? If it's mechanical, like this, for example, and you have unlimited power, movement, strength, freaking yeah. That was a good reference, man.
That was spot on, man. Well done. So because of this kind of addictive side of it, it's quite common for Princeps to kind of lose their mind when they're not attached into it.
Could imagine, yeah.
Yeah. Also, I'll show you. This is a guy strapped into a Throne Mechanicus.
Oh god, he looks comfortable though.
He does, yeah. So that's what a Princeps might look like when he's actually in a Titan.
He does look like he's been sitting there for like some time.
Yeah. So there is a thing, right? It's called the manifold, right? This essentially mind state that you are linked into, the interface between machine and man, is referred to as the manifold, right? Mm-hmm. And the Princeps obviously becomes part of this, right? And is able to monitor the whole machine while he's in this. But the Moderati are like your rank below the Princeps. So they are also hardwired into the Titan, but they're hardwired specifically into one system to give them like instantaneous control and knowledge of all the system sensors and everything. So they can do their job much better. So you'll have Moderati that are wired just into the shields, ones that are wired just into the power core for power distribution, ones that are wired just into like reloading systems, stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
And because they're all hardwired in as well, they're all part of the manifold too. So they can all communicate with each other instantaneously through this like mindscape built into the Titan. But the Titan also develops a mind in this state from its like past crew members and stuff. So there's a thing where I believe it's in the books that involve the Iron Veil and Commodore and all that stuff with the Night World, right? Where the Queen is using her knight to fight. And she's trying to make it do something that it doesn't want to do. And she can, like, hear the voices of all the past crew shouting at her. Because their minds end up, like, imprinted into the machine. So, like, as she's trying to control it, it's, like, fighting against her. So all the Titans end up with a personality of their own, built from, like, the previous crew members and stuff. But they've all been around for that long because they're so hard to kill that most of them have a really strong personality by the modern day. Yeah. It's quite interesting. It adds a bit of flair to them, you know?
I like it, yeah.
It's cool. It's also very dangerous, but it's cool.
That makes it even more cool.
Yeah.
If you ask me.
There is also a thing where if you do something that's like against your legion, so your Titan legion will have like a way of doing things, right? But you got to remember that these are seen as god machines, right? These are about as holy as you get to the Mechanicum, and the crew of a Titan see it the same way. They see it as a god machine, so it's all about respect. So. In the pack I mentioned earlier, the pack of the 4 Titans of the different sizes, the Reaver Titan gets damaged pretty heavily. I think he loses a leg to lava, right? And it's basically just because of a misstep. The Princeps controlling it missteps, and one of its legs falls into lava. Obviously, they take it back and they repair it. But for disrespecting his Titan so heavily that he allowed it to get that badly damaged, he is no longer allowed to be a Princeps. The leader, like the Princeps who runs the biggest machine, like kicks him out basically. But they're on like an expeditionary fleet, so he can't actually go anywhere. He's just stuck on one ship.
So there's like a Titan order.
Yeah,
there's a Titan order.
That's it. Yeah,
I like it.
Yeah. I don't actually think it was the Reaver Titan, now that I think about it. I think it may have been the one of the Knights, one of the Scouts, sorry, one of the smaller ones. Anyway, regardless, he gets kicked out. But to become a Princeps in the first place is possibly one of the most difficult things any human could ever do, right? It is more difficult to become a Princeps than it is to become a Space Marine, right? It's like 1 in a billion people can handle it, if even. Right?
Yeah.
It's incredibly small odds to be able to handle it because, again, the Titans have a personality of their own and they can exert their own will. So if you don't have immensely strong willpower, 1, the Titan will control you rather than you controlling it and it'll just run amok. And 2, it will destroy your mind because you won't be able to handle the like addiction to it and stuff. Even if you can control it, the second you're out of it, you'll just want to go back and have a mental breakdown. Yeah. So the sheer like resilience required to be a Princeps is unbelievable. So they banish this guy for getting his Titan damaged, but they obviously can't go anywhere. But when it gets to like the kind of the end situation of it all, he basically just comes back and is like, look, we both know you can't get rid of me. You need me. Who the hell else are you going to get to run the Titan? Get out of my fucking way. Let me run my machine. It's great. Actually, you know what's funny, right? So that whole book series, just because I'm thinking about it now, that whole book series has a few very funny bits in it because it's made up of so many different groups. So seeing the Cadians deal with like the Mechanicum is very funny because, for example, the Mechanicus does everything in a very strict order, not necessarily the fastest way or the best way, but it's their way. So there is a point where they need to get tanks off of like loading racks, and there's a Mechanicus person in charge of it, and they send a tech marine who is not from the Mechanicus to go and deal with it. And this is the point where this Princeps goes back to his Titans and is like, look, I'm taking control again, get out of my way. But when they get back to where all the tanks are, and this guy's like dicking around, not unloading the right tanks and stuff, because there's an order to it, the tech marine that they've sent back just shoots a hole clean through his chest and takes over. Like, Jesus Christ!
Bruh.
She walks over and is like, "Who's in charge here?" And he's like, "I am." And you hear a gun go off, and she's like, "I am." Just starts barking out orders. I'm like, all right, fair enough. On you go, love. No fucking around.
It's Warhammer, Ryan.
Yep. Shoot your own men if they're getting in your way.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah. All right. So, as far as major components go, the weaponry that these things carry is obviously the biggest part, right? That's the main deal with them, is the weaponry, because they are built for war. But it changes a great deal, so we're going to talk about that in conjunction with, the sizes of Titan and stuff.
Yeah.
So outside of weaponry, the main details you would need to know for storytelling purposes is that the armor is typically adamantium. They run on a plasma generator because it's the only thing that can produce enough power to run one of these fuckers. So they are highly volatile if damaged. It'll be like a nuke going off, to be honest with you, if one of them is damaged severely enough.
Which is why it's strong, like the whole body. Yes.
Yeah.
So strong, but if it goes wrong, it goes very wrong.
Yes. They also are typically outfitted with shield generators, so they will have void shields around them. So it's not just armored, it's also shielded. So it's quite a bastard to kill one of these.
It's like Halo.
Yes, that's exactly it.
Overshield, you know? I'm sorry.
That's fine. And the only other thing that they typically have that's important is the Throne Mechanicum, which you can see there.
Yeah.
So, we are going to talk about some of the different classifications of Titans and the weaponry they would typically have. So, we get to go into some of the fun stuff. This right here is one of the little boys, right? We're going to work smallest to biggest, by the way. We're not covering every Titan because we'll be here all day, so we're just going to do, main guys.
Major. Yeah.
So, this is a Warhound, or a Scout Titan, right? Smallest one, small, fast. That's the idea, right? So there are typically 3 variants of this design. There is the Rapier Scout Titan, the Dire Wolf Heavy Scout, and I can't remember what this particular one is called. The Rapier is a light form of this, and the Dire Wolf Heavy Scout is a heavy form of this, basically. And then you just get this guy, which is a normal one. I can't remember the name for the standard variant. Typically, a Warhound, so one of these, stands about 56 feet tall. So it's not gigantic, it's bigger than most buildings, but it's not the biggest thing you're going to see all day, there's mountains bigger than it, stuff like that. There's buildings bigger than it, to be fair.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah. And as you can see, it sports a different weapon on each arm. Or it can sport the same on both, but typically it's a different one. Depending on what you need it for. Yeah. So the standard Mars pattern of a Warhound Titan will have a Vulcan Mega Bolter and a Plasma Blast Gun as its 2 weapons.
Yeah.
The Vulcan Mega Bolter is essentially a giant twin Gatling cannon, which can fire a Titan caliber shell. So basically, the rounds are like the size of, I guess, a small car. It can fire those at 300 per second. Which is a lot of dead stuff if you do the math.
Yeah,
so absolutely amazing for sweeping a field and taking out an army infantry.
Yeah.
But also, if you just pile enough shots into a tank, it'll go, or another Titan, it'll chew through most things, right? And the Plasma Blast Gun it's essentially just a cannon that fires plasma as weaponry, or as ammunition, which will tear apart most armor and melt most stuff around it when it hits. It's got a bit of a AoE kind of hang to it. Area of effect kind of around where it hits. Bit of splash damage. So it's pretty good for taking out tanks, but will absolutely melt an entire army of humans as well. They'll just be dust. So, they're pretty handy for this stuff. The Rapier Scout Titan, which is the light version of this, is obviously lighter and faster, but that also means it has lighter armor, so it's easier to take down. But the idea is they're meant to be fast, so they have a bit less firepower. So, Pretty standard idea, to be honest with you. The Dire Wolf Heavy Scout, I believe I have a picture of here. Yep, that's an actual model of one. That's a Dire Wolf Heavy Scout. So, about the same height as the last one, but as you can see, it has a heavy weapon mounted on top of it. So, these guys are a bit slower because they're overweighted, but they've got a lot more firepower for it. So, the best strategy for these guys is to march them ahead and hide them. Like, hide them behind anything you can, right? Buildings, whatever. Buildings, mountains, trees, whatever you can hide them behind. And then, as soon as the enemy Titan is in range, just wipe out its leg with a big gun on top of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it still has the 2 arm-mounted weapons. It can still be used for the typical stuff. But the heavy weapon on top is designed specifically for taking out big targets. But, obviously, there's variety for the top-mounted weapons as well. So, for example, there's typically 3 types of weapons it'll have as a carapace mounted weapon, which is the one on top. There is the neutron laser, which is basically an EMP cannon that'll fry electrics. Don't know how that works, but it sounds funny.
It does.
Yeah. If you just clip the head of a Titan, it's just like their body's still working, but all the sensors are wrong now. So that would be a fun one to have. There is a volcano cannon, which is basically just a big laser cannon that will melt anything it hits into a pile of molten slag.
Yeah.
Which is pretty hefty. Like, if you see there's a Reaver Titan coming along and you're hiding in a among trees, if you just smash it in the back of the leg while blast from a volcano cannon, its leg joints will all just melt and it'll just pile to the ground.
Yeah.
Just immediately deletes it from combat.
Yeah, done so. Yeah. Easy.
Exactly, right? And then once it's already lying down, you can just charge up another shot and take the head off.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in the same vein, you can also mount them with, like, mega bolters as arm-mounted weapons. So, it's basically just designed as a faster-moving version of, like, a heavy weapon, right? Because if you want to march a Reaver Titan into battle, there's no way anyone misses that. It's like double the size of this thing. There is no way you miss 100-foot tall robot marching towards your base. You might miss this thing if there's, like, a forest around you, you know? In which case, it might catch you off guard and blow out your legs from under you. Or blast a hole through your citadel walls from 4 feet away because it snuck up on you. That's the idea, right? It's heavy weapons, but it has the possibility of stealth as an advantage.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to move on to the bigger ones, which are the Reaver Battle Titans. So, as you can see, these things are bigger. These are 73 feet tall. I apologize, I said 100 a minute ago. 73. So they're about 20 feet, 30 feet taller than the last guys. But as you can see, they're also just, like, wider built for better balance and stuff. They've got bigger armor than any of the scouts do. And all Reavers have the capability to have a heavy weapon mounted on the back, rather than just the heavy scout only has that. So these things all have better destructive capability off the bat.
Yeah.
Right? Although the weapons they carry are typically different than the scouts, because they're obviously a lot bigger and can carry heavier weapons and can handle heavier recoil. Because if you put too big a gun on a normal Scout Titan, when you fire it, it'll tear its own arm off. So that's a risk you run with putting weapons on robots. So, much like the Heavy Scout, obviously 3 weapons rather than 2, 1 on each arm, 1 on the back. They're also much heavier armoured and typically have 4 void shield generators. So even the shield on these things is much bigger and bulkier than the scouts have. They're just much more survivable. You'll go through 10 scouts before you scratch one of these kind of thing. That's the idea. There is also 3 variants of these guys that typically kick around. There is the Goth, the Hun, and the Vandal. So there's a thing with these, right? They're a middle ground between scouts and warlords, right? They're not as heavily armed as a warlord, and they're not as fast as a scout, right?
Yeah.
But because a warlord is so unbelievably high on firepower and a scout is unbelievably fast for what it is, not meeting either of those doesn't mean you're not a threat. This thing is like a perfect marriage of the two to be an absolute nightmare in combat. Typically, the arm-mounted weapons that they use are either a Gatling blaster or a laser blaster, which are pretty standard stuff. But if they're feeling adventurous, they can replace one of their arm guns with a volcano cannon, you know, the melting laser.
Yeah.
Which is fun. Or a melta cannon, which does a very similar thing. Yeah. Basically, if you want to turn something into a pile of molten metal, this thing can do it. This is the guy you go to.
The mission, you can mix and match,
Exactly. Or if you're feeling really, really excited about getting into a fight, you can swap out one of its arm guns for a power fist and just go like boxing with stuff for close range combat. So it wouldn't actually be the most like surprising thing to see a Reaver that was outfitted to be like a fast moving Reaver, like running into combat with a fist and a sword, like running straight for a Warlord Titan just ready to go at it. Let's see how long your shields hold up, dickhead. So that would not be unheard of, and those are my favourite ones. Typically, if you're outfitting them like that, they are built to be a Titan hunter, though. You're not going to give them melee weapons unless they're fighting another Titan. Because as funny as it would be to see one of them punch through a building to kill like an enemy commander, it's not a very practical situation. A gun is still easier. As far as the back-mounted weapons, they can have a plasma blast gun again, right? They could have a Volkite Mega Bolter, which basically just fires bolter shells that are much bigger. You can also go for like the Apocalypse Missile Launcher, which is what that is on his back there. It just fires a swarm of rockets and just obliterates a whole area with explosions. That's pretty deadly.
It seems like it.
Yeah. If you want to get creative, you can bring in like a Graviton Destructor. This is our first time mentioning a Graviton weapon, I believe. Basically, they use some kind of crazy science that basically whenever you shoot something with it, gravity will increase singularly on the thing you've hit. So if you shoot a person with a gravity weapon, the pressure it applies to them will like turn them into a ball of paste.
Yeah, because if it's just twice, you gotta imagine you gotta weigh twice as much.
Yeah.
If it's 100 times on you,
you're just gonna crumple. So this thing can get a Graviton cannon strapped to its back and basically just crumple enemy Titans into a cube.
Damn.
Yeah. Really useful for tanks and stuff. Really useful for tanks and stuff. Yeah. So that's quite fun. My favorite weapon that they can mount on the back of these is the warp missile, which is a missile that when it fires, it will briefly transport into the warp and then come back out of the warp. So you'll see it fire, then it'll disappear, and then it'll just reappear somewhere and hit something. Right?
Oh, nice.
Yeah. The main benefit being, say you're attacking an enemy citadel, right? But they've got massive void shields all over the thing that you cannot break. Void shields don't do shit if the missile's not in this dimension. So you can just fire the warp missile, it'll disappear into the warp and re-emerge on the other side of the void shields and just wipe out whatever it hits inside. Also works on Titan void shields as well, I might add. So, very cool, very fun weaponry, if you ask me.
It sounds cool. Creative.
Yeah. As far as the variants go, this is the most common design for them. This is the Hun. The Goth is a more long-range weapon, so they'll typically have the volcano cannons and the missile launcher, so they can stay further back. And the Vandal is a short-range combat weapon, so they would typically have I don't know, either like the power fists or like the Volkite Mega Bolters and stuff. The same weapons that work better up close.
Yeah.
That's the difference, really, is they're just specialized for different things. Now, we're going to get on to the big boys. The Warlord Titans. Mm-hmm. Now, this is an absolute unit, as you can see. How tall do you think that guy is?
I have no idea.
108 feet-ish.
Yeah, that's a lot.
That's a lot, yeah.
It's like a walking mountain.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And they're armored like it, too.
I can imagine.
Yeah, and they're also armed to the tits. So
I could imagine.
Yeah, so obviously your scouts had just the arm weapons, your reavers had the arm weapons and a carapace mounted cannon. These things typically have 2 carapace mounted weapons, 2 arm mounted weapons, and often, typically, they will also have turrets randomly mounted on their body for taking down small targets. So they'll just have big bolt cannons and laser cannons and stuff, just as turrets for rapid fire strapped all over them that'll just fire automatically. So totally irrelevant from their actual weaponry, they'll still take out thousands upon thousands of infantry just passively.
Yeah.
Not including standing on them, because that also happens a lot too. Very hard to outrun this thing. It's got a hell of a stride. And big feet. So the turrets that are typically mounted on it are usually either just a Gatling laser, which is pretty standard, or a Mauler bolt cannon, which is just a normal bolt gun like the Space Marine uses, except it fires bigger shells.
Yeah, I mean I reckon this one is has the same options, just bigger.
Essentially, right. Yeah, that's the gist. So again, it's the typical. There's a few different ranges. Of ones that are built to be faster or for long range or for close range, that type of thing is usually how it goes. Yeah. Specifically, there is a version called a Night Gaunt, which is designed to kill other Warlord Titans. So it's just close range weapons to the tits, as you'd expect. And then the long range one will typically have... There are special weapons you can have for this, like the Quake Cannon, which... Yeah. It's essentially kinetic bombardment, right? You just launch the biggest thing you possibly can out of a cannon at the enemy. And it's such a large area of damage, it will cause earthquakes and stuff and destabilize the land when it hits.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, right? Like the Quake Cannon can accidentally set off volcanoes and stuff. It's that big a shot. Funny thing though, right? The ammo loaded into a Quake Cannon is filled partly with remains of planets that have been exterminatus.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. It seems like an irrelevant detail, but it's a thing. And there's also, for example, the Extirpator Cannon, which is just, think like the Volcano Cannon, the melting laser, but bigger and more terrifying. Yeah. Yeah. And again, there's the Graviton Ruinator, which is the same as the Graviton Cannon from before, but again, bigger and more terrifying. You clocked the idea of this pretty early on, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. We took big scary weapons on big scary robots and made them bigger and scarier for the bigger scarier robots. It's a pretty simple strategy.
You can only be as creative in terms of the weapons, but you can't do any more to them, like making more extreme, just make them bigger.
Yeah, exactly, right? That's the beauty of weapons. Bigger usually does more damage, so that's good enough for us, right?
Yeah.
And there is one last type of Titan. Actually, I'll show you a Warlord's model first. So this is what you would actually use on the tabletop.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're quite cool.
Yeah, quite nice, detailed.
Yeah.
I like it.
For the record, there is a lot more variants of these things that we can talk about. Like you saw on the sizing chart, there's also the Warbringers in there as well, right?
Yeah.
So, but there's also more variants of these for more specialized purposes. We're just not getting into all of that today because we'll be here till like Wednesday.
Yeah, we'll be here to
Yeah, be here till next July. But there is one last thing I want to talk about, which is like an honorable mention because it's the coolest one, right?
Yeah.
It is this guy.
Okay, that's a whole city.
Yeah, that is the Imperator class Titan, or the Emperor class Titan in Low Gothic. It is big enough to have a giant cathedral city on its back and still be more heavily armed and armored than a Warlord Titan.
Yeah.
Yeah. You want to guess how tall this fucker is?
200.
You're correct, right? It's anywhere from 164 feet to 328.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is an absolute monster, right? So, not only does it have 2 giant arm-mounted cannons, it also has 6 back-mounted cannons. Basically, this thing, one of these alone, is capable of wiping a planet clean.
Yeah, that's all you need.
That's all you need. Not only that, but it also can house its own military on its back.
Yeah.
These things are nuts. I have one more picture of one of them.
Oh, for God's sake.
That's the classic picture of an Emperor Titan. It's just cool as hell. Like the barrel of its gun, most buildings could fit inside. It's absurd. Love it.
It's nice.
It's very cool. But there you go. Now you know Titans backwards and forwards.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. What do you think?
Bigger, biggest, and just ridiculous.
Yeah. Just
that's
bloody
the best way I can sum
absurd.
it up. Just that's the best way I can put it.
Yeah. For the record, there are Primarchs that have single-handedly taken down Warlord Titans.
Oh, that doesn't surprise me. That doesn't surprise me at all.
I feel like Vulcan could dump tackle one of them if he wanted to.
Probably. They
He's
are
a
just
big
absurd
dude.
as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for some reason, there is a brief period in one of the newer books that features the Demon Mortarion that he's like the size of a Reaver Titan. Briefly, it does nothing for the storyline. It holds no purpose. But for some reason, for like one chapter, they specify he's like 80 feet tall.
All
Like,
right.
yeah, I get you can be, but why are you?
Fair.
Yeah. Actually, as a last detail for you, right? Humanity is not the only people that have Titans.
Oh, I could imagine. Imagine this transfers over to different species or races.
Yeah, exactly. Like the Eldar have Wraith Knights and Wraith Lords, which are their big version of them. Orcs have scrapped together some giant robots from time to time, like Gargants and stuff like that. Even the Tyranids have like formed giant versions of space bugs, like the Nautiloid and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like, these things turn up in every faction, so if one of them turns up on the battlefield, every faction can throw their version of it at it to fight it. But it's really cool when you get, like, a Titan fight between, like, the different factions. It's always cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that's about all I have to say about Titans for now.
Damn. I'm pretty sure we're gonna be covering it a little bit more later on this series.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it'll come up from time to time.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Would you like to round us out?
Sure thing.
If you remember how.
I think I can. All right. Thank you guys for listening to this episode of Iterators of the Imperium Season 4, which is still kind of crazy to say. It's been me, Mess, and Ryan, and it's been a pleasure, and we will see you in the next one. Take care, and peace.
Bye.